So can you sum up in a few sentences or a few minutes the main findings of your books that has been translated, you said, in 24 languages, French being the last?
Well, the main thing we found, the central finding, is that societies with bigger income differences between rich and poor have more of a whole range of health and social problems. They have higher death rates, they have worse mental health, they have lower levels of child well-being, they have more violence, more drug problems. All the problems that are more common at the bottom of society are much more common in more unequal societies. And when I say much more common, I mean anything from twice as common to 10 times as common in the societies like United States, Britain, Portugal, with big income inequalities between rich and poor, compared to, say, the Scandinavian countries or Japan with smaller income differences.
And is that limited to the poorer sections of the populations, or does that affect the all the population?
No, the differences are so big, the differences in performance, in levels of violence and child well-being and so on, because it's not just the poor who are affected by inequality. The vast majority of the population seems to suffer. Indeed, that's why the differences in performance are so big. We can't talk about the super rich because we don't have data on the fraction of 1% who are getting these bonuses and so on. But we can say that 90 or 95% of the population would do better if they, on the same incomes, with the same education, lived in a more equal country. They might live a little longer, their children would do a little better at school, they'd be less likely to become victims of violence. In that sense, people do better in more equal country.
And why do you think that matters in ecological terms?
Well, one of the important connections between sustainability and greater equality is that the big threat to sustainability and why it's so difficult to lower carbon emissions is that the biggest threat to sustainability is consumerism. Consumerism is about status competition and status insecurity. You know, we try and use money to show what we're worth. And in more unequal societies, people work longer hours, they save less of their income, they spend more, they get into debt more because money becomes even more important. And so to reduce consumerism it means reducing the status competition, which is intensified by inequality. So if we want to do something about consumerism, we have to reduce income inequalities. But there is another connection that I think is also important, and that is that more equal societies have more social cohesion. Community life is stronger. People have more to do with each other. People trust each other more. And I think that means that there is a better recognition of the common good. People are more public spirited. And so we find in an international survey of the opinions of business leaders, in more equal countries, business leaders rate environmental agreements as more important. And I think they do that because in more unequal countries, business leaders feel that that's not their job. Their job is to look after themselves. So that sort of weakening of the idea of the public good, I think, damages our chances of reaching sustainability. You also see the effects if you look at recycling. And you know, recycling is basically something we do because we know it has to be done for the good of the environment. And people recycle a higher proportion of a number of waste materials in more equal societies.
You've just insisted on the importance of reducing inequalities. What would be the first steps in that reduction? Which policy tools should a country use in order to do that?
Well, I think the main issue in reducing inequalities is whether you do it after. I'll say that again. Can you edit some out?
Yeah.
I think the most important thing is reducing income differences before tax. You can do a certain amount through redistribution, and I think we have to deal with tax avoidance and tax havens. The trouble with doing that is that any advances we make are so easily undone by another government coming to power. More fundamental, I think, is getting democracy, extending it into the economic sphere. You know, the bonus culture, that is the reason why our societies have become more unequal, the top incomes increasing much faster than incomes in the rest of society. I think that must be seen as an expression of the lack of any democratic constraint on people at the top. And we must deal with it partly by having better legislation for employee representatives on company boards, but I think we must also back more thoroughgoing forms of democracy, have more employee-owned companies, more mutuals, more cooperatives. We must try and grow that sector of the economy. And we can do that partly by having tax advantages to those more democratic models, perhaps by having advantages to companies with smaller pay differences. I think we need funds to provide loans for employee buyouts. There are a few charities that help in that sort of way, but I think we need government funds. We must communicate that this is a better and more ethical way of doing business. Another, I think, connection between this and sustainability is that my very strong impression is that cooperatives and employee-owned companies perform better in environmental and ethical terms. I have yet to see a study of that, but it looks again and again as if they win the awards for environmental performance and so on.
Thank you very much.